And now it's time we move forward to our first session of this conclave. We have named this session, We the Unequal. Let me invite the moderator for this session, CEO of NDTV, Mr. Vikram Chandra, and his very, very esteemed panel.
Thanks, Ritika. Let me start off by, as I said, this is a really, really distinguished panel that we have. And it's really required to discuss, because if you face what women are actually going through, a woman must excel at work, they must excel at home, and maintain an impossible work-life balance. And even if the expectations in some way breed guilt that they are shortchanging both ends. So it's a real problem they have out there. But out in the professional world, another inequality comes into play, whether in a corporate job or in the world of sport. Barring a small handful, women command lesser remuneration than men. Whatever their quality of the work is, even if they're doing as well, they're doing better, as Pranay kept on saying, despite that, sometimes there are pay disparities. And also, of course, that glass ceiling that we hear so much about. So how must a modern woman battle these inequities in the present world? And we have a fantastic panel. So let me start by inviting Priya Dutt, politician. Thank you so much for coming up. Anjum Chopra, former Indian cricket team captain. Naina Lal Kidwai, needs very little further introduction, but one of the top bankers that we've had in this country. Mansi Guha, who's VP Marketing at L'Oreal India. Harshvardhan Neotia, who's president of FICCI, also chairman of the Ambuja Neotia Group. And last but by no means least, Suhail Seth, who will tell us if he is indeed intimidated of women as Pranay hinted. Perhaps we should put the, well, okay, we have men at one side and women in the center. And outnumbered. And outnumbered. No, that's okay. You're out on the side. Suhail, you're a left-winger. Get used to it. Okay, let me just dive straight into it. You know, coming from some organizations, Pranay was talking about NDTV, where look, men are outnumbered. My boss has always been a woman, so sometimes it's slightly, you know, it's strange to really recognize the reality in a large part of the country, and actually a large part of the world, that there are gender disparities, there are inequalities. Why is it that women would not get the same pay for the same job, the same quality of job?
You know, I think because men in most of these jobs are a majority. Now, when you talk about Parliament itself, we are very few women. And I think men, I'm sorry, I don't want to say men and women, but I think that, you know, inherently women are looked upon as the weaker sex. So they're not able to kind of give their best in many things. It could be because they have to take offs. I'm sure, you know, Mrs. Kidwai will be able to tell you they have maternity leave, and they have so many various issues, you know, physically. So I think all this is kind of has labeled women as the weaker sex, and has been, you know, women have been discriminated. I know of so many women who've quit their jobs or have been removed from their jobs because they've taken maternity leave. So these are some issues which you know, have to be looked at, so that women can come out and take a step forward. And
why Naina Lal Kidwai would that though necessarily be the case in organizations which are run by women? And there are a large number of sectors now. Look at the banking sector. Look at the number of top banks now in India which are actually run by women. In fact, it's tough to think of a bank that's not run by a woman these days. They're all run by women. So why in these areas would you not have that particular problem taken care of, and women being a lot more sympathetic to other women who work for them?
So I think these are the very organizations that are setting the stage for right behavior. What we are seeing happen is the hygiene factor in companies has risen to a level where there is sensitivity to these things, that it is not bad to take maternity leave, that you can't be ostracized because you did that. But let me tell you, as someone who brought in flexi hours into the banking world, that these things are not easy to bring in because you have to train your managers, men and women, to recognize that when someone goes off on leave, they're a precious resource and you want them back, that they don't get treated in a way which then makes them lose out in terms of their progress in the corporate ladder. But I'd like to answer the question in another way too, Vikram. I think sometimes we are our own glass ceilings. We see glass ceilings where they don't exist.
Right.
And I can tell you, as someone who is a boss to men and women, the guys push you much harder. They would follow you into the loo if they could. And the women who could don't. So women don't push their cause as hard as guys do. And all things being equal, what can happen as a result is the guy becomes such an irritant that, or he's always threatening to leave, that you end up seeing him being promoted rather than the woman who waits till she's 100% ready for the job. In fact, statistics show women put their hand up for the next role when they're 90% ready. Men will do it when they're 50% ready. So
Right.
some of it is the way we are also tuned into the organizations we work in.
Right. Harsh Neotia, is there a possibility of some sort of a best practice that comes into this? And again, to take our personal example, NDTV, for example, ever since I can recall, for 25 years has had 6 months fully paid maternity leave for women. 6 months of full pay. In fact, I think I was probably the first person in NDTV to actually get paternity leave for 10, 15 years after shouting about gender disparity. Those sort of things could very easily become the norm. And maybe it should be a law, maybe it should be a policy that is across the country, that yes, women are entitled by law to a certain amount of maternity leave and you can't quibble about it.
Yes, I think there is growing awareness, and perhaps many companies have already instituted many such changes, but it is not all pervasive. Somehow there is a legacy issue, maybe we are sort of behind what the world has actually moved to, but those are areas where discussions like this, the awareness that is being created, is certainly making all of us sit up and look at redrafting many of these norms. And they have been. It may not have been to the extent that it needs to be, but I think we moved a fair distance in at least last 5 years. I can remember that a lot more sensitivity to women-related issues are in the workplace today.
Right. Pachi, you're nodding your head. Have things started to change? Have things started to become better?
See, I think that today at the entry level for women at the workplace, there isn't too much of a problem. But what's happening is what Naina ji was talking about, that you have to, as a woman, you have to stay the course. So if you have a goal of succeeding, it could be at different levels of personal goals, you have to stay on it. And I think that's where most of us women are not able to, be consistent. So we have a lot of priorities. I think at the family front, biologically, we undergo changes. You want to be a mom, that kind of sets you back. But you've got to come back and fight for it and get back to work and stay on course. Most women I see, I don't go to the top because they just don't stick to the goal. And the second thing I feel is that men market themselves much better than women, because like Naina ji said, so they are ambitious, so they get on to the boss and they say, no, but I want to do this. They communicate far more. And I think in the corporate sector, it's very important for women to open up and communicate, saying that these are my goals, this is what I want to do, I'm good at my work, and there's nothing wrong in saying I'm good at this. I think most of us don't do that. So that could be one thing for starters.
So in the interest of debate, Suhail, I'm going to invite you to also play devil's advocate whenever you want to on some of these issues, if you feel like. So you said men market themselves better. Is that one way of looking at it? Or is it also, I've heard other flip sides in cocktail conversations and others saying, yes, but women have more choices which men would not have. They can choose to have more flexible hours. What would you say?
When I last checked, Kim Kardashian was still a woman. when I last checked. She may have undergone a change like America will through Trump, but that's another matter. I think women are the smartest people on this planet. Smartest. No, I haven't finished. You may not applaud after this. They know how to play the victim card. They know how to manipulate. I mean, look at you. You're a prime example of having been manipulated by several women in your life.
Would you like to list them?
They are smarter.
Just out of curiosity.
I mean, they're smarter than all of us put together. They love to victimize other women. Now, here's the thing. Why didn't all the women who chaired banks actually have pay parity? Women don't want to see other women as successful as them. That's the nature of the beast. I'm by no means making a value judgment or tarring everyone with the same brush. That's the reality. Number two, men believe that they are being benevolent and indulging in patronage. Not at all. Women know how to extract everything from anyone they wish to extract from. They are the finest syringes of humility, compassion, and avarice. So don't get fooled by, don't have this thing on Women's Day, or like Prannoy said, men are the pits, blah, blah, blah. We are the ones who are at the end of what I call the suffering tunnel. We are the ones that have to be nice, otherwise you'll be called misogynist by about 17 activist women who've been beating up their husbands at night. So, let's be real. There are 3 problems in India. Number 1, we men don't respect women as much as we should. We indulge in tokenism. Number 2, we treat women as objects of either benevolence or patronage, which has to stop. Number 3, our laws are antiquated. Harsh rightly said, it is abominable that the same goddamn corporate India who gets every award, Naina sits on every jury that exists in India, and yet you have a special award for women corporate leaders. Why? Why can't women be corporate leaders irrespective of gender? That is the hypocrisy. Why should you have best women entrepreneur? You should have best entrepreneur. These chambers are equally responsible for the perniciousness of gender discrimination that they have created. Not him, because he's also like you, completely manipulated by his wife. And his wife, like yours, is smarter than the two of you.
I shall wait for my wife to next meet you and see what she hits you with.
She'll love it. Remember, women
now you know
are
why
like
all of you should have paused to hear the full
one
speech
minute.
before you clap.
Your wife will love it because women are like Julius Caesar, of whom Shakespeare said, when you tell Caesar he can't be flattered, he's most flattered.
Would either of you like to either rebut him or hit him with something heavy, in which case...
Now see, this is it. Why do we treat women as tools of violence? She's such a peaceful, sweet little thing sitting there.
Manjana, who wants to reply to him or who wants to beat
I
him
think
up?
Suhail has been at the receiving end, so clearly, because he feels so strongly about the whole thing. But to make things a little serious, I think that we have a clear issue in the country.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's about pay. I think it's about opportunity. So, whether it's the corporate sector, whether it's the social sector, I think there's a lot education can do. And there's a lot that corporates and the government can do, because opportunities and employment for women in the future starts with education. So
That I get, but Naina, I think one of the most interesting moments after a budget that I have ever experienced was they just announced a bank for women, right? A women's bank.
Yeah.
And I remember looking up at and saying, all right, a bank for women, what do we make of this? And I have some of the top bankers there. And I looked up at the screen and there was you there, there was Chanda Kochar there, there was Anudhiti of SBI there, and I think Kalpana was there also. All of you were there.
Yeah.
And I remember at that point saying, why do they need a bank for women?
Yeah.
So I think that's the point that Suhail is making, that we need to be sure as to what the real problem is which needs a solution to.
Yeah.
Because sometimes women are being, and you could argue, again to play devil's advocate, that women are being able to rise in certain areas to the very top in a manner that is sometimes easier in certain sectors in India than it is abroad.
Yes.
For women to become like the heads of banks in India, maybe there'd be more of a struggle in some other countries. For women politicians, look how much America is having to struggle. It might get its first presidential nominee this year. Might. But probably will, but you know what I mean. So are we better off than other countries in some areas when it comes to the glass ceiling?
I can certainly say in the world of financial services we are. I think when we achieved what we did in terms of having this large number of CEOs in the financial sector, it was actually a bit of a surprise when it happened, because the sheer number coming in together was terrific, and no other country has it. But we have so much that isn't working for us. If you look at the number and percentage of women on corporate boards, despite a legislation today that requires it, we are the worst in the world. I mean, we're down at 7%. Forget Norway at 40. You have countries like South Africa, which are at 18 and 19. So why are we so far behind?
Given the onerous responsibilities on directors these days, most women might well feel that it's a blessing in disguise not to be on those boards.
But I have heard the most illogical arguments too. Oh, she's not ready, she's never been on a board. But for heaven's sakes, every guy who came on the board for the first time. So how is he ready?
Okay. Anjum, let me just drag you into this, because obviously one of the areas where women have really, really been out there in the public spotlight, not just now, but for years, P.T. Usha, how many athletes do you know who are as well known as her? And in other fields, of course, today we hear a lot in Saina, Sania, areas like that. But there are still disparities, like in the women cricket team, when the matches are being played, the amount that the captain of the Indian women's team will get and the captain of the men's cricket team will get. There are clear disparities. What do you make of it? I mean, there could be two arguments. One is to say that that's unfair. The other would be to say it depends on what the market pulling power is. And
no, you're right. I think there is disparity. Take nothing away from that. But, being realistic is also another important factor, especially when you're talking about calling the numbers and stuff. I do feel that I look at it as an opportunity, and I'm not being a big person by saying that, this is great, but I think it's a great opportunity. It's also about getting results. The women's team has been pretty consistent by winning games, but not as consistent as they would have liked. Yes, there are lesser opportunities to be winning matches, but the other side is winning it consistently at the world level. When we're talking about men's cricket getting a precedence over women's, we say they've won 3 World Cups. We've not won any till now. We've reached the finals and 6 semi-finals. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about comparing a world champion team to a finalist team, then automatically, as a women's team, we need to do much more than what we've done. In terms of reaching the same level, we can keep saying the same words all over again. Disparities.
But how about women's sports people who have actually outshone men in their individual area? I mean, look at someone like a Saina Nehwal, for example. There hasn't been a male badminton player quite of that stature in India for a long time. You could say the same thing about the way Saina's been playing right now, and others. In those sports and in their cases, is there pay parity? Would they be getting as much as a male counterpart would, because they are better known and as successful, if not more successful, they are more successful than any male counterpart. So would they be getting paid more?
Yes, they will be getting paid more. That's probably a difference between an individual sport and a team sport as well. The International Tennis Organization doesn't have this kind of a disparity. They pay the same amount on prize money in a Wimbledon to a male player or a female player. So there's no disparity over there. It's also about how much performance is getting counted and what is the world looking at. So yes, Saina would be getting paid more. I'm sure Sania is as well. They've made names for themselves. But, when you talk about a gender discrimination between a women's sport and a men's sport, the moment you say a sport, first you have to identify, does a woman play a sport like this? I won't say it still exists with cricket, but yes, there is a lot of sport. The moment you say sports, they say, oh, women still play sport? So those raising of eyebrows is still very much there in the country.
But interestingly, just to finish that point out, there are certain sports that have traditionally been considered male sports, where actually the women have been doing better. I'm talking obviously about sports like boxing or wrestling. If you take a look at wrestling and you look at the women wrestlers who are coming from one of the most patriarchal states that you probably have in India, and yet there are women wrestlers coming out and winning as many medals as the men do.
I think just the word sport is synonymous with men's sport. I've yet to come across people in a room full, they'll be saying, you play sport, okay, is it a women's sport or a men's sport? Because sport, I still feel, is very much synonymous with the male bastion.
All right. One of the areas, Priya, of course, where I guess the disparities are particularly staggering are in politics, naturally. And that's despite the fact that we've had so many women who've been the heads of their party, your own party, Jayalalitha, Mayawati, Mrs. Gandhi earlier. despite that, politics still seems to be by and large a male bastion. Do you feel it? Is it an unequal
Yes,
platform?
it is. I think it's not unequal because people don't want women to come in. Now, in legislation assemblies, there is 50% reservation for women, but we still don't have enough women coming forth, to really fight an election. And I think that has, many reasons, like what Mr. Skidwai very rightly said, it is a woman who has to take the first step. Even when I fought my first election, my first reaction was, I can't do this. It was that fear of the unknown, I guess. Should I take this step? I won't know what to do. So I think that's the fear which you kind of grow up with, that I can do certain things, I can't do certain things. This is the kind of conditioning which women are brought up with. So I think that needs to be broken.
And especially if you're not from a political family. Because a lot of the women who are there are been in a political family to some extent.
Yes, because I think they've seen it, they've experienced how it is to work in politics. And someone who doesn't know anything about politics, who has to come forth, who has the desire to come forth, but yet is very frightened to do so. So we find it very difficult to bring in women into politics even today.
So here?
Well, look at the look at the gender discrimination in the Congress party. Just to promote Rahul, they're keeping poor Priyanka away.
Anyway, I think everyone has their choices. So
on a different note,
the biggest thing of empowerment for women is their choice. So I think we must respect that.
On a serious note, we have to change the social discourse as well. If you look at all the areas of soft power, the most influential is cinema. Cinema, by and large, continues to stereotype, and where you have a lady playing the central character, it's almost treated miracle-like. Oh my God, Kangana Ranaut carried the entire film on her, fragile shoulders. In addition to the social discourse, what is equally critical is...
But hang on that note, things are changing in the last 4 or 5 years. The number of films you see where women have carried the entire
film. Have you heard of a phrase called item men, item boys? I haven't. You must be seeing some kind of film where they have item boys, but we refer to people as item girls, which I find abhorrent. Having said that, education, equal opportunities, skilling, these are areas. But let me tell you, the worst is the taboos which are engendered even by corporate India. I'm actually delighted, I haven't been paid to say this, that L'Oreal Paris and NDTV are actually even discussing this. But my point is, why only discuss this on 8th of March? Why do we only have women, the Prime Minister, for the Prime Minister to say, on Women's Day, let only women MPs speak? Why? We cannot have gender quotas, we must have gender respect. We cannot have a situation where women are idolized on one day of the year and forgotten for the rest of the year. So I'm saying we need to use this platform, this forum, to raise the voice of change.
Right.
And change will come if we actually respect rather than believe we are being patronizing.
Harshjyoti, I do think that's an excellent point that Suhail has made, that it should actually become a reasonably automatic system of parity. That shouldn't have to be either a quota or a special favor done or somebody allowing somebody to rise up. You should have a system all across corporate India and other areas where women can automatically, seamlessly rise without anybody really focusing on their gender. Look at the person. Can that be done? Is it feasible? Is it likely?
Well, you briefly alluded when you were saying that is it something to do with the marketing pull of men in certain areas? Probably in a sense, whether it is psychologically so or it is there because it is ingrained in our belief, it is true that in some categories, the men in terms of pulling power of the brand, be it in film stars or sports personalities, or even sometimes in other areas, there is a tendency to feel that the pulling power is higher. Now, whether this has got created due to long-standing, socio-economic situation in the country, the way we look at women, the way men have always had a little dominant role, or whatever is the reason, that is a reality. And therefore, it is going to require many, many years of consistent awareness campaign and I would say change in social thinking to really bring this to a more equitable kind of situation.
But one of the problems, of course, in changing social thinking is that that could take a really long time. I think we've been trying to change social thinking that men have towards women for 5,000 years and it hasn't completely worked. So there may have to be other more direct interventions.
Well, if you look at it, I mean, women in our Indian context, particularly in, mythologically and then later on even in history, we've had very exalted positions that women have enjoyed, and then over years it has got muddled up and degraded and sometimes even abused. And then again there has been a revival of sorts, and if you see the seesaw of history, there have been this very, very clear ups and downs that women's stature in society have gone through. So social things are like that. They are slow by its inherent nature and they will go through its own course correction.
Well, one of the possibilities, of course, is, in some new areas that are coming up, the startup culture, entrepreneurship, can we really have a greater role for women in that? And that might be some way that you can break away from some of the ceilings and the norms and the problems you have in corporate India. So we did speak to Maneka Gandhi, who's, of course, the Minister for Women and Child Welfare, and we did ask her that question, and we asked her what her ministry is specifically doing about that. So we'll play that for you in just a couple of minutes, what she actually had to say about this. The startup world, is that one area where you think?
Well, if you look at the startup world right now, there was just some statistics in the papers today which are quite dismal in terms of how many women are even CEOs of startup companies, let alone being the entrepreneurs. I think there are reasons for it. A lot of the startups today tend up being in engineering, IT areas, and startups are tending to happen with groups of individuals, duos, friends coming together, and women are getting left out of that startup bundle. And startups are not looking at women as an essential part of their corpus as they grow. So we do need to maybe push this along a bit. The real problem is that the pools we fish in, if the folks coming out of your IITs are just 20% women, or from your IIMs are 30% women, you have to work very hard to try and get 50-50 and yet ensure that it is a meritocracy. So it is that balancing act. So the situation that we have to change is at the grassroots. Women coming through the system, education, science, IT, economics, and of course finance.
I guess, Manshi, one of the other things to do is to also look at positive examples, because that makes a big change. When you see somebody who's done it, then it inspires so many different people. And I think that's part of what this is all about identifying the winners. If you see, for example, successful women sports people, others feel so. When you see those women wrestlers, suddenly village after village, women are feeling, I can do this. If you are a female, actor, for example, and you see, Kangana Ranaut or Priyanka Chopra doing Mary Kom, then you say, I can also have a woman-dominated role. They see Nanadal Kidwai, they feel tempted to go into corporate India.
So I completely agree. I think it starts with positive stories within organizations and larger than life, which is celluloid or even great examples, awards. This is one way. But I think that another way could also be women sharing more with women. So something that Suhail said. I mean, he was. He was trying to be funny, but he was also making a very strong point that women need to encourage more of their kind. So I can tell you, for example, that when a lot of people meet me, they say, okay, but you've just had a baby a few years ago, so how do you manage it? How does it work? I think it's very important to share one's experiences and notes with others and with each other, because that's how then the community grows. Like you see, men, I mean, there is a boys club, and I think all of us pretty much know in each of our lives there is. So, but there should be a girls club, and we should be able to share and stand up for each other, and that can be a good start.
Let me get you on that. So did you find your example quite often inspired others? You're captain of the Indian women's cricket team.
Yes,
a lot of people come and saying that's tempted me to take up the sport.
Look, I took up the sport, obviously looking at male cricketers, looking at people in my own family playing sport at the highest level. I didn't need to go out of my drawing room to look for inspiration. I had enough within it. But yes, when I started playing the sport, and I've always played cricket alongside the men, you know, only playing international tournaments or domestic, I've always stepped down onto the women's ground where all the girls have been playing against each other. But otherwise, I've always played against men. And one reason for that also helped me in my sport was in case I was able to bat well against a bowler, obviously he was bowling at a good speed or a pace, or I was able to hit him out of the park. It was always something, oh, a girl can hit you out of the park, so you better tighten up. So these kind of sentences did come out, but fortunately in the field of sport, they're always taken in a much more positive manner. And because our sport is also good, it's till now known as gentleman's game, even though women evolved with it and women started it. But yes, it's always there.
Priya, the role of positive examples?
I think hugely. I think, people who have already achieved and their stories come out, other women are always inspired by it. But I also want to put in, women, we need to understand ourselves. We are different from men. And I think we should be very happy and comfortable in our own skin. When you look at a child would like to play with, a girl child likes to play with dolls. A boy plays with cars. That's fine. It's the respect for each other. And, which really, even our definition of what is a successful woman. Do we really even bring in homemakers? They are as successful as a woman sitting as a CEO in a company. Today, I'm not a politician. I am just a homemaker. And I realize how difficult.
Why use the word just?
Yeah, exactly. Because when I speak to people, the whole question is, what do you do? A woman is a little hesitant to say, no, I'm just a homemaker. Why? Today I realize how difficult it is because I'm taking care of my children, I'm working, I'm doing everything and I'm giving it my best. So I think it is about respecting a woman's choice. Tomorrow I might say that I don't want to do this anymore and I'm very happy doing my work at home. I think that is the respect we need to give women for their choice.
I think that's a really, really important point. So let me get you in and then maybe I'll get final thoughts from all of our panelists on just that note, that should you, if it comes to really respecting women, you should, as Priya is saying, respect their choices. And there's no reason to say that a successful woman has to be exactly the same as a successful man. You should have equality without demanding identity, is what I think the point is that she's saying.
There are three logical fallacies. No one can determine another person's success. We can't create a criteria for whether she's a successful woman or I'm a successful man. Number two, an important point that needs to be made is we need to create a more robust social infrastructure for women in this country. It is horrific that despite whatever the legal system is, we haven't brought the killers of Nirbhaya to book. The impunity with which politicians make irresponsible statements is for all to see. Mulayam Singh Yadav, leader of a national party, says boys are boys, this is going to happen. The election commission should have debarred him from elections for the next 6 years. So point I'm making is identity issues are at times created or manufactured by women themselves in order to become equal. There is no such thing as equality. We are all living in human silos. If we don't respect those silos, no matter what grading you give to each other, it'll be immaterial. And at times the activism around gender is the biggest enemy towards gender neutrality. What happens is people fight for rights and then you create a wall of men saying, no, but why the hell are they fighting? So these issues need to be resolved.
We're almost out of time. And Nana, but would you like to respond to what Priya said?
Yeah. So how could one argue that having women as role models, women to move ahead, women mentors is great, but let's not leave men out of this equation. We who succeed because we have a husband who understands and shares responsibilities at home. Where and why do we not celebrate these husbands? The father who does not hand over his... only the men clap. So, and why do we not have fathers who we celebrate, who hand over their companies to the kid who is the most equipped, who is the daughter, and not that spoiled son? So why can't we have the change celebrated in our menfolk as well? And my most important point is the mother-in-law. how many of us, when I put this book together of 30 women CEOs, swore by the institution of their mothers-in-laws, and they weren't just saying it, but they said it because it was their mothers-in-laws who typically were at the home looking after the kids while they went off to work as women going off to work. So every institution that is changing and supports women becomes important in this equation. So let's celebrate those and have awards for them too.
All right, those are all excellent ideas. We've got lots to think about, but let's just hear from Menaka Gandhi now on some of the thoughts that her ministry has specifically and what they're doing to encourage entrepreneurship, for example.
I would like women now to help my ministry with their ideas, with their enthusiasm, with telling us what we do, what we can do. This is the first time that the ministry has become so accessible and so proactive, but we still need to know what your needs are so that we can help you fulfill them. Well, one of the things that women entrepreneurs need is marketing. They need an access to buyers. It's all very well to produce the most beautiful thing in the world, but if you don't know how to sell it, then you're stuck with it. For the first time, women in India realize their own worth and their own possibilities.
All right, that was Menaka Gandhi. I'm going to have to thank the panel so much. Thank you so much for being with us and for sharing those insights. You've given us a lot to think about. Mr. Nyotia, I'll invite you to stay on and, well, we'll get the podium back to give the keynote address right now.
Great
Thank you so much.
NDTV Mothers-in-Law of India Award.
Mothers-in-law of India. Okay, that's a good
India's
idea. All
finest
those who
mothers-in-law.
agree, raise your hands.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great honor and privilege to be here today. I would like to thank NDTV and L'Oréal Paris for inviting me to this very, very special occasion on Women of Worth. Well, gender inequality has been an age-old issue which we are all aware of, and they have been evolving over time and taking different shapes. The countries which have been able to close the gender gaps in terms of education, health facilities, job opportunities are also the ones which have improved levels of economic progress and growth. Educating women have had a very positive spillover in terms of the overall externality of raising a healthy family. Educated women generally tend to have lower fertility rates, improved child and maternal mortality rates, better earning for the family, and are able to provide for a more conducive environment for child development. Further, countries which have policies that allow women to balance work and family are better positioned to handle problems arising out of aging population. This is particularly so amply sort of experienced in Japan, and Prime Minister Abe of Japan has been focusing on how to bring in women into the workplace, particularly because of their aging population. Studies also indicate that closing of the gender gaps has a positive impact on the results of companies as well, which Prannoy Roy alluded to early this morning. A linkage has been shown to exist between having more women directors and corporate sustainability. Last but not the least, countries that have had greater representation of women in public life is known to have reduced levels of socio-economic inequality. Once famously, Margaret Thatcher had quoted, and she said, "If you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman." Suhail has left, perhaps he would like to hear this. A survey also that Dr. Roy pointed to of the World Economic Forum study clearly indicates a few things which I'd like to talk to you about in terms of the how companies are looking at the issue of gender equality. Visible leadership by the chief executive and top management on supporting women, including concrete and symbolic actions by top management, and in many cases establishment of a position or department to lead diversity efforts, have proven to be one of the most important levers for progress in achieving gender diversity in a corporate context. Work environment and work-life balance are very important, and therefore providing childcare options and maternity leave of extended periods is very, very important to encourage women in developing their career skills, some things that were also discussed in the panel today. India has one of the lowest rates of female participation in the labor force. This holds back economic growth. India needs to narrow the gender gap and have more women in labor market to fully harness the benefits of the demographic dividend. Looking at the brighter side, however, gender mainstreaming remains a key priority for the Indian government. Some of the important changes have already been initiated, and of course, we have still the pending Women's Reservation Bill, which I think will be a major step. Recently, the President of India also gave a push to the bill and even talked about inclusion of women in combat forces. FICCI has been, of course, working towards women empowerment. 30 years ago, it set up an organization called FICCI Ladies Organization, popularly called FLOW. And this body's main objective was empowerment of women through promotion of entrepreneurship and managerial excellence. It has taken a number of initiatives, which includes recently it has set up a business consultancy cell in Delhi for potential women entrepreneurs. Within the rest of FICCI also, allegiance to women's agenda is strong. FICCI has decided that women and young leaders should constitute at least 30% of its sectoral committees. We haven't been able to achieve this number yet, but this is the targets that we have set for ourselves, and we do hope that we will get more women to participate in our various committees. To ensure diversity on corporate boards, FICCI Center for Corporate Governance has undertaken the Women on Corporate Boards program. This is to help in mentoring women who are joining corporate boards in sharing with them all the issues that they need to be aware of, and so that they can discharge their responsibilities better. I'd like to end by a quote and then a very, very short story. The quote is from Mahatma Gandhi. To call women the weaker sex is a libel. It is man's injustice to woman. If by strength is meant moral power, then women are immeasurably man's superior. Man can never be a woman's equal in the spirit of selfless service with which nature has endowed her. And finally, Ayn Rand had once said, "The question is not who's going to let me, it is who's going to stop me." And this quote is much exemplified by the story of a lady, Chetna Sinha. 17 years ago, Chetna Sinha and her husband, both farmers by profession, approached the Reserve Bank of India with an idea to set up a bank to serve rural women. They were asked this question: how can you run a bank with illiterate women who can't even read and write? Today, the 53-year-old entrepreneur has been successful in not only starting but successfully operating 3 different rural enterprises that are committed to the cause of rural women in the country, which includes India's first cooperative bank for rural women, the Mandeshi Mahila Bank. In 1997, when Sinha started the bank in Maheshwar, a small village in the Satara district of Maharashtra, with a semi-literate workforce of women from the same village, she wanted to provide loans to help farmers recover from their economic condition. But 15 years later, she has managed to do more than just that. Today, despite facing over 8 to 10 hours of load shedding in a day, the bank has managed to successfully introduce both computerized and door-to-door banking to offer its services to over 180,000 women across 9 districts in rural Maharashtra. Of these, 155,000 women are savings account holders. Most of them earn less than rupees 50 a day. In 2006, Sinha, who holds a master's degree in commerce and economics from the University of Mumbai, started the Mandeshi Business School. Since then, it has managed to train over 46,000 women in vocational and entrepreneurial skills, of which over 24,000 have gone on to pursue entrepreneurship after receiving their professional training. Further, to look after the needs of several underprivileged women entrepreneurs, in 2012, Sinha partnered with New York-based Clinton Global Initiative to set up the Mandeshi Chamber of Commerce for Rural Women, a first-of-its-kind chamber of commerce for rural women in India. The chamber aims to both mentor and address the grievances of women entrepreneurs in rural India. In 2002, she was appointed as a World Fellow to the Yale University, and in 2003, she was recognized as the bridge builder by the Harvard University. So that's truly an inspirational story about what a woman can do even though her circumstances at that particular point of time was not very favorable. Thank you very much.